Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. The bespectacled, bedazzling, brush-wielding Zhezhi has just arrived in Wuthering Waves. Hold up, yeah, I know you also want the 5-star resonator Xiangling Yao for free right now, but he's coming in the second half of version 1.2. So for now, we need to focus on if Zhezhi is the right brushstroke for your account. Zhezhi is an ice-coordinated attacker that deals non-negligible damage and provides multiple buffs, like skill damage amplified to the next character. In other words, she's almost perfect for a certain character that works well with coordinated attacks. Jinhsi. Also, quick note, this video was filmed on the media server, so thank you Kuro Games for the opportunity. There may be changes with the official release. This guide will prescribe you the proper glasses so you can see crystal clear as to what Zhezhi can bring to your account. We'll go over the important parts of her kit, her weapons, echoes, and stats, sequences, teams, and some showcases all within this video. Let's start with Zhezhi's fabulous skills, of which she has been brushing up every single day. As is tradition in Wuthering Waves, Zhezhi's kit consists of, no joke, at least 22 proper nouns. Yeah, I stopped counting at a certain point. All this globbity gloop for honestly a pretty straightforward character whose entire kit can be summarized as globs and gloops. Zhezhi's entire goal is to blast out 3 globs and to gloop to each of them. How does she shoot out 3 bird-shaped globs? Well, with her forte. Each tick of her forte allows her to summon a bird glob, which she can quickly gloop on over to activate it to attack a nearby enemy. Let's just say sometimes she wings it. Now, how do we fill up her forte? Her intro skill and basic attacks are the primary ways for Zhezhi to fill up her forte. Both her intro skill and her 3-hit basic attack string fills up around half of her forte. Thus, an intro skill plus B3 string will allow her to fully fill up her forte and is her go-to method to, well, fully fill up her forte. Let's just say you just need the right frame of mind. Now that we know how to fill up her forte, in order to efficiently create all 3 bird-shaped globs, when she is at max forte, simply use her skill to shoot out glob left and glob right. Then press the basic attack button right after her skill to shoot out glob middle. Now that all 3 globs are out, you can simply gloop to each glob by channeling your inner pro gamer by mashing that skill button. She'll gloop on over to each glob and send a bird to attack her enemies. This is her primary way to efficiently generate a lot of concerto. It's notable that if you're able to do 3 gloops within around 8 seconds, the 3rd gloop will do a bit more damage and provide her with some basic attack damage. Finally, we have her liberation, which has all these parameters on the screen. But the most important thing about it is that by simply hitting the enemy regularly, it will perform up to 21 coordinated attacks, 1 every second. Needless to say, these coordinated attacks happen even while she's off field. Alright, both her liberation and her gloops count as basic attack damage. Zhezhi's got all the strokes of a masterpiece. Now there are frankly a ton of additional details, such as... However, out of all this stuff, sticking to her main rotation is all you need when you are starting to use her. The main rotation is as follows. Fill up her forte with her intro, basic 1, basic 2, basic 3. Then shoot out 3 globs with her skill and a quick normal attack right after her skill. Then do your 3 gloops by simply mashing the skill button. Then use her liberation to begin the barrage of coordinated attacks. Now you're at 100 concerto, and if you're using the Heron, this is a good time to use it, where you can now outro to buff the next character. Speaking of buffs, at sequence 0, Zhezhi provides the following buffs. Her outro provides 20% Glacio damage amplify and 25% skill damage amplify, although do keep in mind that whoever receives these buffs will lose these buffs if they swap off during the 14-second buff window. And lastly, her passive 2 provides the incoming character 15 energy. Now that you know the basics about her, there are some details that are worth exploring further. Like how she can glob in midair, glob at different times, gloop around in midair, and swap on and off fairly flexibly. Assuming you have at least 1 forte, here are the times where the heavy attack will shoot out a glob. This information is particularly useful when things don't go perfectly the way you want via her standard rotation, and this is honestly best learned through experimentation and just by playing the game. So yeah, my recommendation is to start off with her basic bread and butter rotation from earlier, and as you master her more, you can incorporate some fancier globs and gloops, like holding the skill button to shoot your globs in midair and glooping around the sky for style points and to outmaneuver your opponents. As a general rule of thumb, she generally wants to do her rotation at least once every 25 seconds, which is her liberation's cooldown. So she's a fairly lowish field time character who provides a long window of off-field coordinated attack damage through her liberation, and she provides some strong outro buffs. There are some cases where she can do 2 outros per rotation, for example with Jinhsi, purely to just provide the skill damage amplify. Now for her talent priority, you want to prioritize her passive 2 and her stats, then her liberation and forte, and then everything else can be leveled when you feel like it. Up next are Zhezhi's stats and echoes. Zhezhi is fairly straightforward to build. She has 2 main options for her 5-piece echo set. The 5-piece Freezing Frost to maximize her personal damage output, or the 5-piece Moonlit Clouds to support another DPS character. While Zhezhi does deal a non-negligible amount of damage, losing a bit of her personal DPS to buff a character like Jinhsi's damage is absolutely worth it from a team DPS perspective. So I actually found myself preferring the Moonlit Clouds, although there are many situations where her personal damage output is going to be more important, so do keep this in mind when choosing which set you prefer. As usual for the Moonlit set, you'll want to use the Heron in the main slot to buff the next character. And if you're using the Glacio set, well, you're stuck with Lampy, who is not a great echo, but alas. It's kind of like finding the perfect pair of glasses. Sometimes you just have to focus on the bigger picture. Overall, I recommend the standard 4-3-3-1-1 loadout with crit for the main stat for the 4-cost echo. The 3-cost echo choices though are interesting. I personally felt like I would occasionally have energy issues while under around 150% energy recharge. As such, I found an energy recharge 3-cost piece to be my go-to option. This does notably lose her around 14.4% damage, but not having enough energy for her liberation was a far bigger issue than her doing a bit less damage. This is especially the case since while the damage she does is certainly non-negligible, on her better teams, Jinhsi, it doesn't make up the majority of her team's damage. If you find yourself not having energy issues and or you have literally around 5 energy regen substats, then double Glacio 3 costs will allow her to do the most damage possible. For substats, since her damage distribution is 76% normal attack damage, I recommend the substats of crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, normal attack damage, and energy recharge. Hopefully this knowledge will help you see a bit more clearly. Get it? Because she wears glasses. Next, we have her weapon options. Breaking news! Her signature weapon is her best option. And seeing is believing, and it's a true sight for sore eyes that the 5-star strongbox weapon, the Cosmic Ripples, isn't that far behind, dealing only around 14% less damage than her signature Rectifier. Sadly though, when it comes to the 4-star weapons, well, that's where things get foggy. The Battle Pass weapon, the Augment, is her best 4-star choice in terms of damage. Another option if you really don't care about her damage output is the Variation to generate more Concerto. In theory, it should be able to save a second or so, especially at Refinement 5, off her rotation time, thus speeding up the process for helping your Dragon Puke Nuke, if you're using Jinhsi, to come out a bit sooner. Funnily enough, her 4-star weapon options are so dire that even the 3-star weapon option, the Guardian Rectifier, is one of her best free-to-play friendly options. Let's next talk about her sequences. If you won the lottery, well, you can consider these. Sequence 1 gives her 10% crit rate and also mitigates her energy issues, allowing you to very comfortably and reliably run a Glacio damage 3-cost echo instead of an energy regen echo. As such, this leads to a larger damage gain than the one reflected in these calcs, which is only reflecting the 10% crit rate. S2 extends the maximum quantity of inklets fired by 6, which basically extends her burst from 21 inklet shots to 27 inklet shots. Sequence 3 gives her up to 45% attack, and Sequence 4 gives 20% attack to the entire team, which further improves her supporting and buffing capabilities. Sequence 5 and 6 just make her do more damage with additional hits, and by Sequence 6, she's finally seeing clearly enough and seeing double of S0 Zhezhi's damage, or about 1.9 times. Up next are Zhezhi's teams. I've made this chart of how much a character's damage output is based on skill damage. The reason why we care about this is because Zhezhi's outro skill provides 24% skill damage amplify and also 20% glacio damage amplify. Out of this list, Jinhsi clearly stands out. Not only that, but Zhezhi's constant barrage of bird gloop counts as coordinated attacks and thus fills up Jinhsi's forte extremely quickly. Now, the only reason I didn't give Zhezhi a 5-star rating for compatibility with Jinhsi as a teammate is because of Zhezhi's outro skill, which also gives glacio damage. Another character who she strongly synergizes with, not necessarily because of the skill damage that he does, but because of the glacio damage he does, is Lingyang. Lingyang likes to spend a lot of time on the field as well, and he does deal a non-negligible amount of skill damage. Still, it's Lingyang, and, well, it's Lingyang. So, enough said. The next best contender, in my opinion, is Changli. I think Zhezhi has decent enough synergy with Changli, especially since Zhezhi doesn't really like to stay on field for long, while Changli does like to spend a lot of time on field. On top of that, a majority of Changli's damage counts as skill damage, which Zhezhi does buff a bit. Sadly, Changli's outro does basically nothing on a team with Zhezhi, which is a bit of a shame. Finally, other DPS characters like Shixia, Alto, Danjin should in theory work fine with Zhezhi, as all of these characters also appreciate the 15 energy that Zhezhi provides, making their liberations much more accessible, and they also all deal non-negligible amounts of skill damage. As for the other characters on this list, they can all work with Zhezhi since Zhezhi is a fairly universal character, and every character appreciates energy and skill damage outro. But you might struggle to 3 Dorito difficult chambers, and these characters don't benefit as much as some of the previous characters mentioned. Alright, and Verena is obviously always the best support, but you can obviously always use a different support if needed. Let's just say if you have Jinhsi and you're getting Zhezhi, well, things are looking very optimistic. Okay, I've got 4 team showcases for you guys today against the quite challenging, actually, level 100 Scar in the Tower of Adversity. Now, this Scar is pretty tanky, and honestly, if these characters can 3 Dorito it, it's a pretty good showcase for them, especially at sequence 0. Now, this first team is actually a team that focuses on Zhezhi's personal DPS, and we have the 5-piece Glacial, and we also have the Refinement 1 weapons for the 5-star characters, although the 4-star characters are just kind of using like whatever the 5-star strongbox is. But we can see there that we are doing a full rotation here. We have Verena outro into Sanhua into Zhezhi, and I was actually really impressed with this team because Zhezhi, so much of her damage comes from basic attack type damage. Sanhua's basic attack outro, which amplifies basic attack damage by a ton, actually pushes Zhezhi's personal damage, who, doesn't really have the highest personal damage, but with so much of her damage being amplified by Sanhua, well, we are actually able to have some pretty good showing here of Zhezhi's damage output, and she, as the main, damage dealer of this team, managed to 3 Dorito it with 3 seconds left. Now, the next team to showcase is a Lingyang team. Lingyang is using the standard 5-star weapon, whatever it is. I don't remember the name of the gauntlet, I believe. So anyway, Zhezhi, though, of course, buffs both glacio damage as well as skill damage, of which Lingyang, well, does a lot of glacio damage, and he also does some skill damage. And what's nice about this team is that it flows really nicely between all the teammates' kind of rotation times and windows. Now you can see me, I'm kind of getting my butt kicked here, and I usually also later on I would end up using Lampy on Lingyang during I swap cancel it during Zhezhi's thing, but we can see there that this team is actually also doing surprisingly well and had a very similar performance to Zhezhi being kind of the main DPS, and in this case we still managed to 3 Dorito it, although we were cutting it kind of close with just 6 seconds left. All these runs actually only have a few seconds left in order to 3 Dorito it. So next one is Changli. I'm sure many of you guys are curious about Changli since she does a lot of skill damage and seems to have some decent synergy with Zhezhi. And yes, that is definitely the case. However, of course, Changli doesn't do too much skill damage in comparison to, for example, a character like Jinhsi, but she still does a lot of it. And we can see here that Changli is going ham now. Changli also has some pretty long rotation times, So that kind of works out pretty well for Zhezhi, who, doesn't really need to be on field for very long. And we can see there a full rotation is also doing roughly around a quarter of Scar's health. And just like that, also with about 10 seconds left on the clock, we were able to 3 Dorito these. Now, of course, none of these runs are perfect. So yeah, do take that with a grain of salt. These are just me test running these characters. Now, next one, I'm sure you guys have all been waiting to see Jinhsi. Now, I was quite surprised, but Scar resists Spectro damage, which I was really confused as to why Jinhsi was hitting like a wet noodle against Scar. So instead, we are taking it into Tower 2-2, where, the enemies don't resist Jinhsi's Spectro damage. So yeah, Jinhsi is just going ham on here, clearing the first wave, and we have our first Dragon Puke nuke of 216,000 damage. Of course, the first Dragon Puke nuke has pretty lowish in comparison damage due to the fact that Jinhsi has some ramp up time because she needs to get her outro in order for the stacks to build up quickly. And here we go. Second Dragon Puke nuke unfortunately did not crit, but it was a 108,000 damage Dragon Puke nuke. And this team synergizes really well in my opinion, because you can just because of Jinhsi's short rotation times and Zhezhi's long rotation times, you can actually double intro into Jinhsi twice during one of Zhezhi's rotation. I'm not sure if you should do 2 of Zhezhi's outros or 2 of Verena's outros. I went for 2 of Verena's outros in this case. 287,000 damage nuke, just like that. But yeah, I went for 2 of Verena's outros instead of 2 of Zhezhi's outros because I feel like Verena's outro times are a bit faster, and to me it just lined up a little bit better. However, there is definitely some theory crafting going around for double Zhezhi outro into Jinhsi, and now we're about to finish this thing off in a very reasonable amount of time. Well, okay, we're still on Zhezhi's rotation part, but yeah, so up next we're going to go into Jinhsi, and we end this run with a 400,000 damage nuke when all the buffs align. Bam, just like that. A nice clean way to end this run. As you can see, Zhezhi appears to be tailor-made for Jinhsi owners, providing Jinhsi with a formidable 25% skill damage amplify via her outro and a bunch of ice coordinated attacks to fill up Jinhsi's forte much faster. Many other characters also deal significant amounts of skill damage, but I do think her best compatibility is with Jinhsi. Still, Zhezhi is a fairly universal character who provides a myriad of useful buffs with good concerto generation. Zhezhi's Glacio damage amplify will likely also be useful in the future as the roster expands and we get more DPS characters. Let me know what you think about Zhezhi down in the comments below and whether or not you'll be pulling for her. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.